Hello there, welcome to my review of the Rockford Files Season 1, Episode 14, Orally Farewell. Written by Edward J. Lasco and Roy Huggins, and directed by our first Columbo connection, Jackie Cooper, who appeared as Nelson Hayward in Candidate for Crime.
Then all that remains for you is to dig the bullet out of the wall and take it to ballistics for a comparison.
I've already dug the bullet out of the wall. Here's the bullet.
He would go on to direct 4 more Rockford episodes and appear in 2. The episode begins with Robert Webber's Senator Evan Murdoch picking up a hitchhiker, the Aura Lee of the title. He offers to buy her lunch and things move pretty fast from there. As they make their way that evening, a distracted Murdoch hits a man. Aura Lee wants to stay with the man, who is still alive, but Murdoch insists she hides in the car and he flags down another car to look after the man while he drives off to call an ambulance, on the way letting Aura Lee know that he's married and this is where their romance has to end. She's not particularly thrilled with how it ends, but seems to accept it. What I like about this opening is how you're pretty certain that Murdoch is just going to take off after he hits the man and then do away with the only witness, Aura Lee. But it subverts that by showing the senator kind of doing the right thing. Yes, he's a cheat, but he's not a monster, and he's prepared to face the consequences for the accident, even if he's not prepared to face the consequences for the affair.
I have just accidentally run over a man about a mile south of the Ventura County line. This is State Senator Evan Murdoch.
We then cut to Jim and the return of Sarah Butler from the pilot, again played by Lindsay Wagner, as they argue over their dinner plans. She's finally managed to pay what she owes Rockford for their previous encounter, but only because she wants to hire him again, to find out what really killed her friend.
Do you remember Arlie Benton?
The audacity of the writers to portray Murdoch as a basically noble guy, only to pull the rug from under us minutes later, is quite something. But it also puts us a couple of steps ahead of Rockford at this point. He is inclined to believe the official police report that she died of a heroin overdose, but we know there's a good chance it's more than that. It's also nice that they use these scenes with Sarah to establish that he's been seeing her on and off ever since he worked for her, and give an explanation as to why it's been on and off.
She was there 2 weeks ago when you picked me up for my dream date, remember?
Come on, Sarah, that was a good fight. It was a knockout in the 5th round.
This time, Sarah can pay Jim as she found $2,600 in a box of matchbooks belonging to Aura Lee, and as she had no family, Sarah feels obligated to find out what really happened to her. Jim goes to see Dennis, but he too follows the official line. Jim, now having seen the file, is slightly less convinced that it was an overdose. In the course of his investigations, he comes across an artist who lived in her building, played by Bill Mumy.
The chick's dead, you know. I got no eyes to get involved.
Who we last saw playing Sarah's brother. Jim returns to Sarah, having had no luck finding anything that indicates murder. But a letter has arrived for Aura Lee from Oscar, the owner of the diner Murdoch dropped her at. They go to see Oscar at his diner, and we get a fun scene where he negotiates a fee for his information that really adds a bit of colour to this episode.
You got a portrait of Andrew Jackson?
How about Lincoln?
I'll tell you what, make it a Hamilton.
What are you two talking about?
Money.
Between the slightly cryptic conversation about money and his enthusiasm for his soup,
Damn, that's good.
it just elevates it from a purely expository scene. After finding out that Aurelie was there, but not exactly when, and not exactly who she left with, he returns to the artist, who gives him a license plate, and he's able to get Dennis to run it for him. Jim then goes to see the owner of the car, Dirk Schaefer, who remains tight-lipped but has recorded the conversation and is waiting for Jim in his trailer when Jim gets home.
Could I get you a beer, Dirk, or some salted peanuts, something?
This time he's ready to talk and says he picked up Aurelie hitchhiking and they went out a few times. She asked him for the heroin that killed her and he supplied it. Rockford doesn't believe his story for a second and goes to Sarah wanting to go through Aurelie's box of possessions. He finds an obituary cut out from a newspaper, and Dennis tells him that the dead man was the man that Murdoch hit. Finally, the pieces are falling into place for him. The way the mystery unfolds in this episode is remarkably compelling, considering at the halfway point Jim has only finally just caught up with what we already knew. By not making it too easy for him, and with the chemistry between him and Sarah holding everything together, it manages to remain compelling. But from here on out, we now know as much as he does. He goes to see the senator, who happens to be up for re-election, and gets an audience with him by dropping Aurelie's name.
Would you like me to step out in front of the TV cameras and ask you to explain your relationship with a Miss Aurelie Benton?
Murdoch claims not to know Aurelie, or that she's dead, and thinks Rockford is acting as a go-between to blackmail him, but gives Jim just enough information to find the motel Murdoch took Aurelie to. Unfortunately, this lead also comes to a dead end, but that doesn't stop Jim from telling Murdoch he was spotted there. Murdoch claims he was with a woman, but it was not Aurelie, and Jim pretends to want to blackmail him.
How much do you want for the registration card?
Depends.
On what?
Well, what do you think, Senator?
But the next day, Sarah calls with the news that the senator appears to have killed himself. This is a twist it would have been very hard to see coming, as Murdoch looks certain to be the murderer. But this is a brilliant example of how to subvert expectations in a very satisfying way, as all through this we've had a very non-traditional mystery that takes us just slightly off course from what we think is going to happen. It's not the tale of the ambitious but libidinous senator trying to protect his career and marriage at all costs, which, ironically, is what Jackie Cooper's Columbo episode was about. Instead, it's a genuine mystery as to who is behind all this. Jim suspects conman Dirk Schaefer knows what's really going on, and so breaks into his apartment, finding a photo and the blackmail evidence he was claiming to have. What he doesn't realise is he's been followed by a motorcyclist for a while now. After confirming with Oscar that Aurelie left his restaurant with Dirk and reasoning
She innocently told him what she'd been through that night, and he reads about the accident in the papers, realizes who she had been with, so he goes to Murdoch and starts shaking him down.
But killed Aurelie, then Murdoch to keep the heat off him. Unfortunately, before he and Sarah can go to the cops, Jim's car breaks down, having been tampered with, and the motorcyclist makes their move. Jim manages to outsmart the biker and send him off a cliff. It is indeed Schaefer, which brings the case to an end. Well, apart from Sarah telling Jim that she had to give the money she was going to pay him with to the police, as Aurelie had obtained it illegally, meaning that she has to start her payment plan with him once again. Here we have yet another great example of the Rockford files telling a very different story to the ones that came before it. with the return of Lindsay Wagner adding some extra detail to the story that isn't necessary, but gives us yet more character information about who Jim really is. The mystery has just the right amount of twists and turns to remain engaging without getting confusing, and the pacing is perfect to keep you entertained as it goes from Jim playing catch-up to the audience to him overtaking us. The way it plays with how we feel about Murdoch throughout the episode, while it hides the real villain in plain sight, is also brilliantly done, and it's a really original conceit that I haven't seen done before or since. For me, this is another 5 out of 5. Thank you. Goodbye.